Sure. So we do biological and mechanical filtration for both municipal and industrial plants. So
When you, just to kind of walk back, so mechanical and biological, that's going to be what makes up those that it's removing?
the media doesn't break down and become less efficient over time. So
You said denitrification, which is like a pretty hard one for a lot of these mechanical plants, especially to hit. How do you do it?
So what's nice about it is it's basically zero cost back, right? There's no labor involved. You don't have to actuate a valve.
There's not even a pump putting this air in?
There's an air pump.
Okay.
The simplicity of operation is a big deal. Show how we can do both nitrification and Bead simultaneously, and especially nitrification in the presence of high organic concentrations. So we compete against biologically like an MBBR or a trickling filter, even an MBR, although that's kind of a different animal just in terms of complexity and what they can hit.
What's the approval process like for you guys? A lot of things here at WEFTech are newer technologies which can hit these marks. Some states are more open than others. How has that journey been like for y'all?
I mean,
All right, so I'm here at the AST Filters booth with Michael. Kind of walk me through what you guys do and who you serve.
sure. So we do biological and mechanical filtration for both municipal and industrial plants. So it's the technology is basically, it's called a bead filter. It's an upflow media filter that serves as a biological and mechanical filter simultaneously. So the media is a low density polyethylene bead media. So the same plastic like you find on the top of a Coca-Cola bottle. The media doesn't break down and become less efficient over time. Biologically, it acts as a fixed film reactor. Basically, we get a thin film of bacteria growing on the surface of the media, and that's what's going to consume, dissolved organics. We'll also get nitrification out of it. And then at the same time, the unit operates as a mechanical filter using mechanisms similar to like a sand filter.
When you, just to kind of walk back, so mechanical and biological, that's going to be what makes up those that it's removing?
VOD. We can get ammonia. They can be configured for denitrification. So, and then there's we've done specialty stuff like BTEX remediation at a Superfund site. We can be used for, in some circumstances, like phosphorus removal, things like that. Just if it can be removed mechanically as a particulate, and then biologically, we can remove at pretty much anything that's biologically degradable. So.
You said denitrification, which is like a pretty hard one for a lot of these mechanical plants, especially to hit. How do you do it?
So we use same filters. It would be a big single pass unit like this, kind of see in the background there. What we do is we slow the flow way down to encourage anoxic conditions, right? And then we couple it with consumes all the oxygen, and then basically it goes anaerobic, and we couple it with a carbon feed and monitor the ORP coming out to avoid sulfide production.
Right. There's a ton of these mountain lagoons that can't hit nitrification. They can't hit some of the new limits. There's other stuff too. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, lagoon polishing is a big, application for us, especially in the municipal world. Versus somebody going in and having to put a whole new mechanical plant in, they can put us at the end of the lagoon, and basically it's much less expensive because it just basically requires the concrete pad and the unit itself. So this is a lagoon in Mississippi. This is another lagoon in Mississippi. They just couldn't meet their ammonia limits here. So you can imagine with something that big, how much it would cost to put in a replacement mechanical plant. And especially in these rural communities, they just don't have the money to do that. So this is a great alternative to that.
Yeah. In comparison to what is it cheaper in comparison to?
So, all right, well, what would we compete against? So we compete against biologically like an MBBR or a trickling filter, even an MBR, although that's kind of a different animal just in terms of complexity and what they can hit. And then on the other end, for solids removal, we can replace sand filters, dome filters, pretty much any of your more common biological. But the big take home is we replace both of them, both the biological and the mechanical. So if you say we were looking at putting an MBBR in, because of the solids generation from an MBBR, you're going to have to put something downstream to remove the solids that have been generated as a result, right? So what we're doing is we're controlling the solids that we're generating at the same time. So you get both of them in one.
What you're saying is a lot of that, you have a huge TSS body of fluid that has to go somewhere.
Right.
this will actually capture it in the beads. Do those beads have to get replaced periodically, or what's their life cycle?
Again, it's a low density polyethylene, so it doesn't actually, not on any routine basis. The only real reason that we replace it is because if we lose it, if it gets out of the unit, the reason that can happen is, you know, a retention screen fails, or a lot of the times it's just somebody opens the wrong valve, you know, and leaves it open. So other than that, they don't become less efficient over time. So you don't need to replace them on any routine basis. So I guess another way to say, like, when we do our operational expense calculations, we don't consider replacement media as part of that, like in a 20-year life cycle.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So when it filters it out, does it go to a waste stream, or does it end up being hauled off to the landfill?
So yeah, it's going to come out as a liquid sludge, right? And I can show you here in a second over here what the backflush is and what that really looks like. But basically with our recirculating units, it's going to be the same air that we're using for backflushing will automatically discharge the sludge out of the unit. And it comes out probably about 0.5% solids. And typically what they'll do in the lagoon, send it right back to the head of the lagoon, right? And
Recycle.
yeah, it's just, you know, they'll have to dredge eventually, but it's not a huge deal. Or like at the ice cream facility, it goes to a holding tank, and their plan is to put dewatering in.
What's the approval process like for you guys? A lot of things here at WEFTech are newer technologies, which can hit these marks. Some states are more open than others. How's that journey been like for y'all?
I mean, that is definitely, it's an uphill battle, and it really varies from state to state. So like, for instance, it's pretty easy to get approval in Mississippi. It wasn't hard. Louisiana was also relatively straightforward. Colorado, for instance, is definitely a more stringent state. They definitely want to see, you know, the technology proved beforehand.
Are you able to utilize some of your other experiences as comparables, like as a pilot study, or do they say it's not?
So one of the things is climate, right? So especially on the lagoon polishing side, you know, nitrification in cold water, you get to a certain threshold, it's just not going to happen, right?
Right.
So the state of Colorado says, that's great, you've done this in Georgia, or you've done this in Louisiana, but
80 degrees most at a minimum.
right, yeah, exactly. So, you know, now tell me how you do it, you know, 0 degrees, right? So that's one of the things, is basically every state you have to go in and pilot. Like, there's some exceptions. I'm pretty sure Missouri, if you have pilot data from Iowa for whatever reason, they use that as kind of like a golden standard, and they'll consider approval through something like that. But again, it's climate to climate. And the other thing is, the regulations vary so much from state to state, right? So whereas we have, you know, ammonia is really becoming a concern, you know, in Mississippi and, you know, Louisiana, things like that. Arizona's had total nitrogen limits for 20 years. You know, so now they all have denitrification. So it's just different, like what you have to hit.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How does someone keep up with it? How do you keep up with it? Are
I
you
mean, it's our reps. We have local municipal reps that
in the various states?
various states, and they really help us navigate those regulatory bodies and things like that. So yeah, it's pretty cool. This is a slowed down version. What this is going to show you is that backflush that I mentioned, an automatic air driven backflush, no moving parts in. Yeah. So see that bottom blue chamber there, the cup on the bottom?
Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're slowly feeding air into that cup. That air is going to accumulate till it reaches a trigger volume, at which point it all gets released into the bead bed above. What that does is expands the media, releases the captured solids, and because we've evacuated that chamber with the air, it basically, the dirty water gets vacuumed up into that, and then the solids settle out to the bottom of the unit over the course of the next air fill cycle.
That's really cool.
So what's nice about it is it's basically zero cost backflush, right? There's no labor involved. You don't have to actuate a valve.
There's not even a pump putting this air in?
There's an air pump.
Okay. But it's just like it's not like something in the lagoon that's adding aeration.
No,
like
yeah.
That much kind of.
Right. Well, so in some of them, we do have regenerative blowers. So like right over here, that's actually a model of, so this is Moorhead, Mississippi. This is actually an older model, but those are 220 horse, I think, you know, positive displacement blowers. And then the backflush air is supplied by these compressors here. And under normal circumstances, this is a 250 cubic foot unit, which references the volume of media in it. So a 250 cubic foot unit to backflush it once an hour, which is way more than we ever would, requires 250 CFH of air, right? Okay. So realistically, these things are probably backflushing at most once every 6 hours. So the amount of air that you need for backflushing is next to nothing. Okay. It's really minimal.
So it happens maybe 4 times a day.
Yeah, but again, you can set that and you just adjust the rate that you fill the air, right? And that's how that's how simple it is. So the other thing that it speaks to, like, the simplicity of operation is a big deal. That's what a lot of our clients like, is you don't need to have a high level understanding of wastewater to operate one of these units. Basically, all of them have, you can kind of see there's a little window there where you can see the media, and you can diagnose a lot just by the appearance of the media.
Like
right?
the coloration of
Like
it.
the color, and like, so if you can see the plastic in it, you're probably backflushing too much. And if they start looking like a fuzzy football, you're probably not backflushing enough, right? And then the operator's corrective actions is just to turn that air up or down. That's it. And I mean, this, again, we do like municipal lagoon polishing applications, but we also have industrial applications where we're taking a high strength BOD and getting it below like a surcharge threshold, for instance. Or we had a poultry plant in Georgia that was in violation on TKN, and like not like a being surcharged, but high enough that the city said you have to do something, or we'll shut it down, right?
Yeah.
So we were able to do that, and what was kind of that really showed how we can do both nitrification and B simultaneously, like, and especially nitrification in the presence of high organic concentrations. Whereas like you'll see a trickling filter and you'll see inhibition because of the high BOD. The other applications that we have, so dairies in California are coming under new
Dairy farms.
like dairy, yeah, like with the cows, like where they're actually milking them. They're coming under new regs for methane emissions because they have a lot of lagoon-based manure management systems, right? Basically, they just flush the manure into these lagoons. The lagoons go anaerobic and release a bunch of methane, right? So what we're doing there is we come downstream from, it's basically an incline separator that gets the coarse stuff out, and then the idea is we get the finer particulate out before it gets in the lagoon and has the opportunity to break down and release methane. So yeah, we're ahead of the lagoon here because we're getting the manure that was going to go in there. We basically get it out before it has a chance to break down and release. And then the other side of that is it also helps with some nutrient removal. Any sort of form of nitrogen or phosphorus that's in the solid form, we get it out because they use that water for irrigation, right? And it has such a high nutrient concentration that they can't use it directly, so they have to dilute it, and sometimes it's like a 4-to-1 dilution. And one of the big deals there is, especially during the drought in California, the water table has fallen so low, right? The aquifers, I guess, that they're now having to pump up from 100 feet, something like that. So there's a whole energy element. So we have a study approved with Cal Edison in California, basically just on the energy saving side, and we're also approved with their air board, the state of California.
So that helps. You're able to go for other funding sources that are tied to like an energy impact grant or something like that to help even further help with funding it.
Yeah, and the state will actually help these guys out, and there's programs for basically improving their manure management, and we're an approved technology with them through the air board.
Okay.
So,
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's really interesting when you're trying to navigate the actual funding the project.
Right.
It's like sometimes that's the hardest thing. It's not that you have the solution. Well, we know how to do it,
Right.
but how do we get the numbers to line up? And so it's always fascinating hearing those stories.
Yeah, I mean, and with the dairy, and like it's just they don't make much. Like they're very tight margins, especially right now. I don't know what's going on exactly, but apparently it's tough for them. So they just would never have the money to do that. So makes sense. Yeah, yeah.
Cool. I think that's it. That was amazing. Thank you so much for doing this interview.
Yeah, thanks for stopping by.
All right. I think we're good. Yeah.